If we've learned anything during the time of COVID, it is that we need to be willing to embrace change, that it's going to come at us, and we need to be ready. So when COVID hit in the spring, one way we stayed connected was with a morning devotion. Now, 7 months later, it seems like change is needed. If necessity demands it, and we return to a hard lockdown, we may revive it. The response to the devotion and other digital offerings were positive. So, we have decided to keep our foot in the door, so to speak, by offering one digital offering a week. Thus, for a while, you will be able to count on inspiration being offered weekly on Wednesday. Unless we tell you otherwise, we will usually post it late afternoon or early evening. You can count on a variety. Sometimes it will be an interview, other times devotional thought. We're going to mix in some music and a bit of light theology. Some weeks it'll be no longer than 5 minutes. But when we do an interview, it will be noticeably longer. If you find it inspiring, please share it on your Facebook page. While it will have a variety of approaches, it will focus on inspiring us to draw closer to our God and the way of compassion. Good evening. Last week, we introduced you to one of the formats that we are experimenting with here in our Good Wednesday Pelham Road, which was a long-form interview with Joe Mason. This week, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to try to walk you through a little bit of, I guess you might call it biblical history or biblical formation, maybe. Hopefully it'll be inspiring as well. So I'm going to get to it real quick here. I'm going to try to pull up a shared screen to show you something. All right. A good argument. One of the things that you need to notice when you're reading the Bible is that sometimes there are contradicting opinions and positions. I say oftentimes that the Bible is a library, and not all the books in the library agree. And so the biblical editors didn't really feel a need to sort of push different books out or different thoughts out or different ideas out. They didn't exempt anything. What they tried to do was include it so that they could reveal to everybody every choice that they had. And so oftentimes what you have are some really good arguments. And we're going to listen to one right now, right? I think if I push that, we can move on to the next screen. Maybe not. There we go. I went too far. All right. This is from Ezra chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. Let me move this around here. Shanaka, son of Jalah, the descendants of Elam, addressed Ezra, saying, "We have broken faith with our God and have married foreign women from the peoples of the land. But even now there is hope for Israel in spite of this. So now let us make a covenant with our God to send away all these wives and their children, according to the counsel of my Lord and of those who tremble at the commandments of our God. And let it be done according to the law. Take action, for it is your duty, and we are with you. Be strong and do it." Then Ezra stood up and made the leading priest, the Levites, and all Israel swear that they would do as had been said. And so they swore. Ezra was very interested in pursuing a policy of purity, of trying to get all the foreigners out of the country. He deemed that the problem with Israel was that these foreign influences had come into the country. Ezra was written between 450 and 400 BCE. It's set in Babylon and Jerusalem. Ezra's trying to get a group of people to return to Jerusalem and resettle it.
And so that's why it's really important to him to try to make sure that people who go back to Jerusalem are people who call that home and who want to be there. And one of the stories passed down in the sacred stories of Israel is that foreign women, and presumably all foreigners, are the problem. I mean, that's a theme that you can find in Ezra and in other places, that there's a lot of people who feel strongly that these mixed marriages with these other cultures, Moabites, Amorites, so forth, are the real problem. And so the solution, at least what you read a moment ago in Ezra, the solution is that to honor God, you must abandon both the women and the children. I mean, that's actually what the text said. I mean, right here it says you have to, so now let us make a covenant with our God to send away all the wives and children. A covenant with God, a promise to God to send away women and children, to abandon both women and children. And women didn't have anywhere to turn. There was no social safety net. Children had nowhere to turn. So somehow in their thinking, they felt as if purity to God was so important that it was worth actually hurting people over. That to remain pure to God, what they thought was pure to God, if it involved actually getting rid of children and getting rid of wives and leaving them in a culture that did not have any sort of social safety net or protections for women, that would be a good thing. Of course, left to the street, these women would have become prostitutes. Well, the interesting thing is that's not the only opinion in the Bible. That's one side of the argument. Here's the other side, the book of Ruth. Now, Ruth can get a little bit confusing for some folks, so let's not be confused. Naomi is the mother. Ruth is the actual daughter-in-law, so the book is named after the daughter-in-law. Both are widows, and Ruth is a Moabite, all right, meaning she's from Moab. She's not a Hebrew. So this is Ruth 4, verses 9 through 11. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, today you are my witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred or from the gate of his native place. And today you are my witnesses. So obviously Boaz wanted to marry the woman, but this is what the people say. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. So not only does Boaz want to marry Ruth, because you can sort of see sometimes love can cross a lot of different lines, you also see that the community is supportive of this idea, that even though she's a Moabite, they are absolutely fine with this. They have no issue with it. Now, this was also written in the 400s. The book can be read as a political parable relating to issues around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. One of the reasons why people would say that it is possible, you can read it as a parable. When the phrase is you can read it as a parable, it doesn't mean that everybody concludes that it is a parable. But it can be read like a parable because these names of these characters seem to be so, they seem to be too fitting. The husband, his name was God is King. His wife's name, Naomi, was pleasing. And the children's name were sickness and wasting. And of course, after they die, Naomi wants to be called Mara, or bitter. And so because these names seem so perfect for their given situation in life, some people read it as a parable. But I think you know the story enough to know that Ruth decides to accompany Naomi back to her home country after the death of both of their husbands. Now, the reference to Moab raises an interesting question. In Deuteronomy, you can see the quote I've given you. The Moabites were excluded from the congregation of the Lord, even into the 10th generation. So for Ruth to feature the book of Ruth, to feature a Moabite so positively, looks very much like the way Jesus uses the Samaritans in the New Testament. In other words, the Moabites are put in a very favorable light because if you read the book of Ruth, how could you not like Ruth? She's just a great woman. She is a great example of womanhood and humanity. So the conclusion you begin to arrive at in Ruth is the other or the foreigner is not the issue. The real issue is that people see them differently and don't view them the way God views them or the way they should be viewed. Now, despite the Deuteronomy prohibition, Ruth the Moabite married a Judite, and even after his death, still regarded herself a member of his family. That's her first husband. She then married another Judite and bore him a son who became an ancestor of David. So the summary for the book of Ruth is foreigners who are welcome become good members of God's family. That they're not the problem. The problem is us inviting them in. So unlike the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah, where marriages between Jewish men and non-Jewish women were broken up, Ruth teaches that foreigners can become faithful Jews. Foreign wives can become exemplary followers of God. And there is no reason to exclude them or their offspring from the community. Obviously, these are differing opinions, right? I mean, Ezra sees it one way, the book of Ruth sees it another way. That's the plan. I mean, that's absolutely. So when somebody says, well, they contradict one another, you say, well, that's what a good argument is. It wouldn't be an argument if they didn't contradict one another. So yeah, it's plenty of contradiction. That's the plan here. Scripture is a library of debate. I mean, practically on every page. Scripture has different voices. Ezra's voice is raised, and the editors didn't see any reason to stuff that voice down or mute it or to remove it. And Ruth's voice is raised up, and they didn't see any reason to extinguish that flame either. And oddly enough, if you look in the Bible, they're not too far apart from one another in the actual table of contents. The people of God are supposed to wrestle and decide. That's what it means to be a moral people. We have to see these issues and then wrestle with them and decide what we think the God that we serve, the God that we follow, the God that was revealed to us most closely and dearly in Jesus Christ, what that God would want us to do more. So this has been a good example of how these arguments are formed in the Bible, and these are two very different opinions. I hope you've enjoyed this little tour, and I hope it communicated well. You have a good evening. I'll see you next week.